Wouldn't that be nice? Can you imagine for a moment, you came home from work and your wife just lovingly looked at you. She just grabbed you by the face. She kissed you, she hugged you, and she's just like, thank you so much for working so hard. We appreciate it so much. I made your favorite dinner and there's a cold beer on the table. I like to use, and I know this, we're getting in the weeds on this one, but when my wife is venting about something negative, right? And it could be something that pissed her off. What I will do is sometimes loving our wives, we're just scratching our heads. We're just like, man, like I hug her, I kiss her, I tell her how beautiful she is, and it just doesn't really seem to move the needle. I do things for her, and I'm just not really sure why it's not moving the needle. You know, our wives have 3 different needs, and, you know, to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel safe. And there are several different things that go with each one of those things. But for seeing her, there are 3 different things that we can do that will really, really move the needle. And to be honest, they're very, very simple, but quite frankly, they're not on our radar. And take it from a guy who's been married for almost 22 years and is still learning this stuff. You would think like after 2 decades, we might have, you know, the answer here, but I still do that. Like I still neglect these things from time to time. But however, when I put these things on front of mind and I do these things daily appreciation, intentional observation, I celebrate her wins, those types of things. I notice that my wife like literally just comes to life. So let me talk about first just the daily appreciation. Our wives do a lot of things that are, quite frankly, they feel are invisible, right? Because it's just part of their roles. It might be they're doing the grocery shopping, they're straightening up the kitchen, they're cooking dinner or whatever. I'm not saying that dudes don't do those roles. Like I do those roles too, and you probably do too, but our wives actually identify a lot of times with those roles as their job. So when they're doing these things, it's almost like us going to work. They're not necessarily going to go out of their way and say how much they appreciate us for working so hard. However, wouldn't that be nice? Can you imagine for a moment, you came home from work and your wife just lovingly looked at you. She just grabbed you by the face. She kissed you, she hugged you, and she's just like, thank you so much for working so hard. We appreciate it so much. I made your favorite dinner and there's a cold beer on the table. You might seriously like, holy crap, like what just happened? Like you would feel so appreciated, so loved, and like you'd feel on top of the world. You might think that somebody kidnapped your wife and did something with her, right? But you would really love it and you'd really appreciate it. And quite frankly, it's the simplest thing ever. It's not very complicated. Well, guess what? She actually needs to feel the same thing. She needs to feel seen. It's actually more important for her to feel seen. So how do we do that daily? How do we do it through intentional observation? And how do we celebrate her wins? So daily, right? My wife, she's been a stay-at-home mom for 19 years. She does pretty much all the grocery shopping. And when she comes home, one thing I've learned is to just be like, hey, thank you so much for going to the grocery store. Thank you for getting everybody's favorite food. I really appreciate you doing that. And my wife will look at me almost puzzled. And she's like, I really appreciate that. You know, it's my job, but I really appreciate that. I'm like, I know you view it that way. And that's another reason why we appreciate it. So thank you for doing it all the time. I know it's not the sexiest job in the world. And my wife will just like, she'll melt. She'll be like, oh my God, like, thank you for saying that. That just means the world to me. So just some of the things like, whether it be like, thank you so much for cooking dinner. Thank you for wiping down the counters. Thank you for vacuuming, whatever it is. Thank you for cleaning the shower, whatever it is, just thanking her for those types of small things every single day that quite frankly, they don't really hit our radar, but saying them out loud goes a long way. There's another one too, intentional observation. My wife loves to decorate our home. She actually takes a lot of pride in it. And if you listen to a podcast that I did with Mark Azoulay, that was a few weeks ago, he talked about this notion of how men and women are different, right? And if you look at our home and our family, the men really focus on the perimeter, right? The fence around the village, the fence around the house, the fence around the family, like the defenses, the finances. Are we protected? Are we good from all these outside forces that could threaten us? And then the women take a lot of pride on, you know, basically making the inside of the village warm, inviting, comforting, and loving, right? My wife loves to decorate, and she loves to decorate for the season, but she also loves to decorate in general. And she lives in the house with 5 men, and not the most observant men at that. But like, I notice that when my kids or myself, when we point out, like, oh my gosh, like, look at the Christmas tree. It looks amazing. Look at the decorative things you did over here on this shelf, right? Look at how you did the lights. They're just perfect. Like, look at how the furniture is set up. You know, it just looks awesome, warm, and inviting. things like that we're pointing out that mom does, like that intentional observation, it just shows that we notice, and it goes such a long way. So the other thing too is celebrate her wins with great enthusiasm, whether she got a promotion at work, whether, she did something fantastic for your kid, or something in a way, or maybe she's lost weight. Maybe she's been on a weight loss journey and she's losing weight, but like a way that we can like be her cheering section, not just you, but you actually rallying the entire family to celebrate your wife's wins, to celebrate mom's wins. What I can promise you is that will go a very, very long way. The second way that we can really, really love our wives is to hear them. Okay, is to hear them. And while we think us as men we are the best listeners in the world because we're listening for ways to fix things, that doesn't necessarily mean that it lands for them that we're listening. In fact, usually what happens when a man and a woman is having a conversation is the woman is sharing whatever's on her mind. It could be positive, could be negative. She might be venting or whatever, but the man usually feels a need to give advice or to fix. And what I can tell you is, why do we do that? Number one, we do that because it actually comes from a really cool place in our heart. We do that because we love them. We don't want to see people we love in agony or pain. So what do? We try to fix, right? We'll give advice. We will give solutions, and our wives look at us and we don't really understand it either. And they're just wanted us to listen. By reflecting back on things that we've heard, or by validating their emotional state, we're actually doing that. We could just simply say like, man, that sounds really frustrating. Tell me more about that. I know that sounds completely and totally oversimplified, and it also probably doesn't, you might not even feel that might even solve the problem. But what I can tell you is when your wife is talking to you, she's not necessarily looking for you to solve her problems. Sometimes it's like that. And if I'm ever confused, I'll just ask, would you like for me to listen? Because I'll do that all day long. Or if you want to talk solutions, we can do that too. Which one feels best to you? Now notice I said, which one feels best to you? I say the word feel because women are feelers. They're emotional. So when I say which one feels best to you, I'm really aiming for her heart. And she might be like, you know what, if you could just listen, that'd be amazing. Yep, no problem. Got you. If we could talk solutions, yep, I got you on that one too. All day long, right? But getting clear on that, but really they're after one thing, and it's one word, and it starts with a C, and it's connection. Our wives are coming and talking to us. It's either a happy emotion, it could be a really frustrated emotion, it can even be a sad emotion. Women don't care what emotion it is. They just want to connect. This is why women talk and they actually connect in sadness, and they're excited about it because they connect in sadness. And all the while us dudes are like, I don't really get this, because all I want to talk about is being happy and strong and fixing problems, because that's how we're wired. And you know what? It's a blessing. The world would not be where it's at today if men weren't problem solvers. But in an intimate relationship, that's not necessarily what's needed. So how do we hear them? We reflect back on what they heard, and we use emotional validation. Emotions, remember, are one word: happy, sad, frustrated, annoyed, irritated, aggravated, whatever those emotions are. I like to use, and I know this, we're getting in the weeds on this one, but when my wife is venting about something negative, right? And it could be something that pissed her off. What I will do is I will globalize that emotion instead of localize it. And you're probably like, well, what the hell does that even mean? Well, here's what it means. When we globalize somebody's emotional situation or emotional state, we're actually putting the spotlight on the situation, not the person. Let me explain. So when I say, that sounds really frustrating, tell me more about that. That sounds infuriating, tell me about that. I don't say, you sound frustrated. You sound infuriated. And why do I not do that with my wife? Because it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man or a kid. Human beings don't like to be associated with anger, sadness, irritation, annoyance, exhaustion, irritability, all these things that we actually identify as negative. And by the way, really quick side note, emotions are neither bad nor good. They're neither positive nor negative. They just are. They're part of the human experience, but we view them as negative. So anytime someone says, you sound really frustrated, we feel a certain sense of guilt, shame, and even disconnection from the other person, because we feel like, oh crap, like they got me, like I'm upset, I'm mad, like, and then we'll kind of retract a little bit. We'll go into this hole and we'll disconnect from people because we don't want them to see us. But when we say that sounds infuriating, I would be pissed off too. When we say the that and not the you, we're actually casting that spotlight onto the situation and not the person, which is really inviting for the other person who's going through a negative emotion. And when we invite for more and say, tell me more about what's going on, that is one of the most connecting phrases we can possibly say. Instead, if you do the opposite of that, which it could look like this, you sound really pissed off. Why are you so mad? Oh my God, you might as well just tell the person to shut up, tell her to be quiet, because that's the way she'll take it. But if you say, that sounds really frustrating, tell me more about that, you have suddenly become the most interesting man in the room. You suddenly become the most attractive and sexiest man alive because you invited in for a deeper conversation. I know it sounds oversimplified. Don't get me wrong. I'm a dude. You're a dude listening to this podcast. Well, actually, we got a lot of women, I think, who listen to this show. But if you're a man and you go seek the advice and wisdom of another, sharing a problem with another man, and he says, that sounds really frustrating, you'd scratch your head and be like, yeah, man, it is. Like, what do you think I should do about it? We go and seek counsel from other men, and we go and talk about these things because we want exactly that. We actually want our problems to be solved through advice and through guidance of another man. That's not the same with women, at least not about 80% of the time. I don't know statistics. I'm not going to try to make them up. All I know is I can tell you is the majority of the time, they're not looking for solutions. And if you're ever confused, you can ask. So if it's a negative emotion, that sounds really frustrating. Tell me more about that. If it's a positive emotion, you can actually put this connection on steroids. So if your wife comes home and she's like, oh my God, I lost 10 pounds. I got on the scale today. I went to the doctor. I lost 10 pounds. That is when we actually want to localize the feeling. So I'll say something like, oh my gosh, you must feel so amazing. You must feel so proud. You must feel so happy. Why do I do that? I do that because human beings, we like to be associated with positive emotions. I want to feel happy. I want to feel strong. I want to feel resilient. I want to feel ecstatic. I want to feel on top of the world. That's not even an emotion, but you guys get it. Like, I want to be associated with those feelings. I don't want to be associated with the bad ones. So when someone says, you must feel so happy, someone feels seen, they feel heard, they feel connected. So when you do this with your wife, oh my gosh, no way. Are you serious? You must feel amazing. Tell me more about this. How'd you do it? You suddenly just became the most interesting, most attractive man in the room, right? So let's recap that. Negative emotion, globalize it. That sounds frustrating. Positive emotion, you must feel so proud, right? Tell me more about that. Always invite for more. Eradicate the word why out of your vocabulary. Replace the 3-letter word why, W-H-Y, with tell me more. Replace 3-letter word with 3 words. Tell me more at all costs if you can. One of the biggest questions is, how do I make my wife feel safe? There's a lot of safety buttons. And a lot of guys, what we do is we think about like, well, she's physically safe. Like, she knows I'm not going to hurt her. She knows I'm not going to hit her, right? Does she feel emotionally safe, right? And she's like, well, I don't abuse her. I don't call her names. I don't yell at her. And that's fine too. There's even financial intimacy, financial safety as well. I'm going to go into a couple of different scenarios here, but they're really just 4 ways that you can make your wife feel safer. And one is being dependable. Be a man of your word. And what I mean by that is what really makes your wife feel safe is knowing that she can count on you. If you say you're going to be there at 7:00, be there at 6:55. If you're going to the grocery store and you have 11 items on your list and you come home with 10, guess what? She actually doesn't feel that safe because she feels that she can't depend on you. I know for getting butter at the grocery store is not that big of a deal, but in her mind, what she's thinking is if you forgot the butter and that's really, really small, what else are you going to forget? What else is not on your radar, right? So being dependable is huge, not just dependable for her, but also for the kids. If you say you are driving your kids to soccer practice at 7:00 and you get in the car at 7:30 to take your kids to soccer practice, that's not the most dependable dude. She's going to be looking at you like you're not the most dependable dad. Or if you forgot about soccer practice, or you suddenly, it's not important, you can't take them. There's not many guys who listen to this podcast who are going to do that, but just know that you have to be a man of your word. If you tell your kid, hey, at 5:00, we're going to go out and play catch, and then suddenly you got to go do a work thing at 5:00 and you're like, hey, sorry, buddy, it's not going to be tonight. Trust me when I tell you, she sees that and it triggers that uncertainty button. It triggers that safety button. Another way too. So being a man of your word is another one. Conflict resolution. How do you handle conflict? A lot of guys, when we get in arguments, we yell, we scream, we might say really nasty things, we might curse. Being able to calmly resolve conflict through a calm voice, through logic, through rationale, is something that your wife is looking for you to lead. Now, sometimes our wives don't follow and they don't take the lead, right? Sometimes they're just as fiery, if not more, and they could be saying something erratic. But if we can always take the high ground and be someone who is dependable, and dependable meaning like in an argument, I am not going to completely go off course here and lose my cool. I'm not going to call you names. I'm not going to push you around. I'm not going to throw things. I'm not going to break things. I'm not going to scream, yell, kick, hit, or anything. Again, I don't think anybody listening to this show is probably doing that. But however, how you resolve conflict, if the more calm you can do it, the better you're going to be. Okay. Another one is to be authentic and vulnerable. Now, our wives, this one is a delicate balance too. Okay. So here's what I mean by that. Our wives want us to share our emotions openly. Okay. However, they don't want the shitty first draft of our emotions. In other words, like there's a lot of us out there. I'm included in this camp big time. Okay. I will be triggered by an emotion. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's fear or sadness or something, but usually what it'll lead to is anger. And for me, what usually happens, and I think a lot of guys are wired like this, is I'm trying to process through an emotion. And when I'm trying to process through an emotion, I tend to go inward and I tend to get cold and I tend to get isolated, and it has nothing to do with the people around me. It has everything to do with the fact that I am trying to dissect, process, and understand what it is that I'm feeling, why I'm feeling that way, and most importantly, what am I going to do about it? But when I'm in that process, I tend to be really standoffish. I tend to be quite cold, and my wife will tell me this, right? So what do I need to do about it? In order to number one, I want my wife to know what I'm feeling, but I don't want to be a sappy, emotional, like estrogenic sponge, right? I want to know, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? So I can clearly articulate it to her. So it's really a two-part process. Number one, I'm not going to share my first draft shitty emotions. That came from a podcast guest, which was, again, Mark Azulay. He came out and talked about this. I want to process through emotions, but while I'm processing through emotions, one way to make my wife feel safe is to tell her, hey, I just want to share this. I'm going through a couple things in my mind right now. Some hard things, might be some things at work. It might be some, whatever it is. I'm going through some hard things right now. I'm just trying to process through them. So if I seem a bit off, if I seem a bit cold, or I seem distant, trust me when I say it has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with the kids. I'm just in my head. Give me till the end of the day, and I promise I'll come back and I'll share what's going on. And then my wife is like, oh, like literally like, oh my God, like, thank you so much. Like my kids, the same way. They're like, oh my gosh, we thought it was us. Right. So communicating that will make your family feel safe. Then once you understand, like, hey, here's what happened today. There was a client that I was dealing with. He got really, really pissed off, and he said this and that. And he wrote this, he shared this with me in an email, and this, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And then I talked to him. And so anyway, I can share what's going on with my wife of like, hey, I got really, really angry earlier today. This is what happened. I'm good now, but I got really, really angry, and here's what happened, and here's why I felt that way, and here's what I did about it. You know, that is something that your wife will truly, truly, truly appreciate, is that type of communication. So trust me when I say, like, us dudes, man, we go through a process when we're feeling emotions. And a lot of times we're just trying to process through them. And when we do that, we're not the best communicators. We go inward. In fact, there's some shame and there's some guilt of like, why can't I handle this better? Or why is this taking me long to process that? Don't even worry about that. Take your time to process through it, but communicate to the people that you love what's going on so they know what to do with that energy as well. The other thing too is protect your wife at all costs. Protect your marriage with boundaries. You know, one of the things that our wives might get triggered by is how much we drink. If you're a heavy drinker and you don't have boundaries around your drinking and you're at a social gathering, she might feel a tremendous amount of anxiety and doesn't feel safe around, like, I don't know what this night's going to turn into. I just got an amazing DM from a wife who shared with me that her husband has been sober now for 5 months, and he's a great dad. He's a great husband, but she always felt a tremendous sense of anxiety and just uncertainty when he drank, and he stopped drinking. And she praised him and appreciated him for like how great he's been without drinking. And she also shared with him like how unpredictable and how unsafe she felt when he did drink. And he was like, oh my God, like I had no idea. So boundaries around your marriage, whether that's drinking, a behavior you have, it could be even your extended family. It could be your mom and dad. It could be that nasty brother of yours or something. It could be anything, but boundaries around your family and your marriage are really, really meaningful, that she knows that your family is first priority. It comes over your drinking habits. It comes over any behaviors or even any extended family threats. other women, coworkers, female friendships you have. Boundaries are something that really keep our wives safe. Now, the last and final one is this, and don't worry, we're getting to the good stuff, which is show love every single day. Now, one is physical affection. And if your wife is wired anything like my wife, when I touch her, she automatically thinks, even though I've proven to her over and over again over the years, like, hey, I'm not out for just one thing. Like, I just want to share with you that I love you, right? Whether that's a hug or a kiss, or maybe it's a long hug, or maybe it's holding hands, like any type of physical gesture. Sometimes our wives will filter that through, well, he just wants some action. So when I'm physically affectionate with my wife and I don't have an agenda, which is 70, 80% of the time, 20 to 30%, I've got an agenda. I'm showing you some physical affection because I have an agenda, right? I'm a dude. But 70, 80% of the time, I don't. 70, 80% of the time, I just want to love my wife. I just want to show her some physical affection. But 100% of the time, my wife will think I have an agenda. So in those times where I have reason to believe that she thinks I'm going to take this thing to the next level, take this hug to the bedroom, I'll just whisper to her, be like, I don't want a thing from you. I just want to love you for a second. That's it. And I'll just literally feel my wife, like I'll feel her physically relax, like show, right? Oh, thank God. I hate having sex with you. She would never say that, I don't think anyway. But I know that she appreciates those non-agenda physical affection cues, a hug, a kiss, hold of the hand, arm around you, whatever it is, just no agenda. Also, surprise gestures are great on the daily if you can. A Post-it note on the mirror goes a long way. A coffee at her favorite Starbucks goes a long way. A little note on the dashboard of her car goes a long way. A text in the middle of the day saying something specific that you appreciate about her, whether it's something you've seen or heard, like those small gestures go a very long way. One other thing you can do too is just help without asking, how can I help you? In fact, what I'll tell you guys, what I've really learned here recently, and this came from my podcast with Zach Watson, how triggering it is for our wives to hear, what can I do to help? How can I help you? What help do you need? Don't do that. Don't do it. And I'll tell you why. When I first heard this lesson of like, don't ask your wife for help, I kind of got triggered and I kind of got pissed. I'm like, well, we're being helpful. Like what do they want? Right. But here is how our wives interpret it. Right, wrong, or indifferent, this is how they interpret it. Your wife is carrying a lot of mental load, a lot of cognitive load, a lot of things on her plate, a lot of things that she's managing and dealing with. When we ask, how can I help, or how can I help you, or what do you want me to do? Basically what we're doing is we're actually adding to that mental load. Now she has to manage us, which then she looks at us almost like a man-child or somebody else she has to manage. What's really, really sexy and what's really appealing is we don't say a word and we just step up and just start doing stuff because we see it needs to be done. And by the way, it's not rocket science. If there's dishes in the sink, when we're asking, how can I help you? Just go do the dishes in the sink. Or if you see that she's cooking dinner, just clean up as she's going. Like you're a part of that house too. So am I. So are the kids. Everybody can help, right? But it's not asking, how can I help you? It's just doing it, right? And another one is words of affirmation. Whether your wife's love language is words of affirmation, a very specific compliment goes a long way. And I'm not talking about your hair looks great. Oh my God, you look so great in those yoga pants. You look so beautiful. No, I'm talking about like, hey, I just want to tell you, and this is actually a true story. My 8-year-old did something wrong. He got caught in a lie and he got punished for it. He got a consequence for it. And I was pissed. But the way my wife handled it was like a champ. And there was a consequence and she was direct, but she was also very loving. She had like this beautiful combination of love, warmth, but also like, you did something wrong and it's not cool and you are going to have a consequence. However, we still love you and you are still amazing. And let's talk about the lesson that we learned here. Let's talk about why we did this. And she just talked to him in like such a calm way. He was kind of crying over it. He was very upset. And she just very lovingly taught him this lesson. It was like this perfect combination of hard love and also love at the same time. There was a consequence, but there was also warmth to go with it. And I told my wife, I was like, I just feel like I watched something magical. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, I'm over here pissed. Like I just wanted to yell at him. I just wanted to punish him. I was like, and I sat here and I'm not kidding, guys. Like I sat there and I watched my wife talk to my son, my 8-year-old son, and I put myself in my 8-year-old son's position, hearing this message from his mom, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God. I was like, every kid should have an experience like this, where he feels the pain of the lesson, feels the pain of the punishment, but he knows he's loved. He's not guilt-ridden with shame and blame and guilt. He knows his parents still love him. And I told my wife, I pulled her aside that night and I said, I have to tell you, and I didn't have any agenda about that. I genuinely felt this. I pulled my wife aside and I said, hey, I just witnessed one of the coolest parenting moments I think I've ever seen. She's like, what are you talking about? She like looked at me really puzzled. And I said, you knelt down, you got eyeball to eyeball with him. You spoke to him so gently, but yet direct too. He knew that he was loved. He knew he did something wrong. He knew that there was a consequence, but he also knew that he was loved, that he wasn't like kicked out of the family over this, right? Like he wasn't blasted. Like he's walking away from this knowing it was wrong. He learned something, but he also was very, very loved. And you just had this incredible combination of that. Like I wish I could bottle that up and drink it before every single interaction I have with our kids where I'm really, really pissed off. And she kind of laughed and she's like, I really appreciate that. And I'm like, yeah. So like catching our wives and saying something very, very specific like that really, really moves the needle for them. So I hope today really, really helped you guys out. Because I know in my world, seen, heard, safe, it's not enough just to know that stuff. But what do I do with it? How do I do it? What does it look like on the daily, right? What are the words that I say? What are the situations I leverage this in? How, right? And hopefully today's podcast gives you exactly that.